Hi, welcome. Um, we'll get started in a little bit. I'm really excited about this course. Singing with a smooth tone, I think, is very, very important. And we're going to discuss a key factor in singing and the voice. I think it's something that sometimes gets neglected, especially in the contemporary realm, although you'll hear a lot about this in classical singing, and that's using resonance. And so that's going to be a big aspect of singing with a smooth tone. Hi, welcome. Um, Feel free to respond in the chat and ask any questions. I'm so glad someone showed up. We had a little bit of a scheduling thing, and so it seemed like it was going to air for yesterday, but actually it was scheduled for today. So hopefully y'all will check in with this a little later. I think it's a really, really good topic. So this is about singing with a smooth tone. Hi, welcome. I'm so glad you showed up. I'll type in the chat too. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about a lot about resonance and particular exercises and strategies for using resonance and how vowel shapes fit into finding resonance in your voice and transitioning from one vowel to the next to gain a smooth texture and tone. I think this is so important. There's a lot of talk about the SOVT thing and strengthening your voice, and that's a huge aspect of this, but a key factor in singing. But resonance is kind of the other side of it, and it's what gives buoyancy and stability to our voice, and it's all about the shape. There's a lot of things that are really complicated about this, but we don't have to do too much of that. Our body does it for us. We just have to make sure we do the right kinds of exercises and listen for resonance. So let's kind of dive in. This is really exciting. I'm so glad some people are showing up for this. And, one thing I'd recommend first before you start with any kind of resonance exercise is do some stretching. It's like I talked about with strengthening your voice. It's great to do a little bit of exercise to get your system going. The same is true for this, but I would say more on the stretching and relaxation side, and that's going to help to release some of the head and neck muscles. So give yourself like some neck turns and things to open up the back, maybe some forward folds, whatever your routine is, some yoga. It's going to really help actually, because you're going to be in a more relaxed state to start working on this stuff. So one of the first things that we want to do in order to find resonance is to use a hum. And this is actually going to help us just sort of get the internal sound of this sort of ringing, pinging sound. And I'll show you what I mean. We're going to go through vowel shapes actually internally. So it's like I'm going e, a, o, u, or ya and wa. And we'll talk about those glides in a second. So the first thing you're going to want to do is in some sort of lower part of your range. This is for lower voice singers right now is where I'm playing this. Maybe a little bit on the higher end of lower voice singers, so like a tenor. And I'm going to sink into a nice gentle hum, and I'm going to go like this. I'll do it a couple times to get into a flow. Gently moving my head and neck around, because just right when we start singing, we tend to get very rigid when we're trying to do something specific. So you might find that you're kind of locking with your shoulders or your neck. And so just give it a job. Gently start to stretch kind of as you do this. And I don't know if you could hear or notice that sort of tinny kind of ringing sound, right? As I was moving through things, it almost sounds like a synthesizer sort of. And that's what we're kind of listening for. And the more you kind of do this, the more resonance is going to start to occur. And it's by gaining some flexibility with the tongue and gently starting to move the front of our face. And this stimulates what we call the singer's formant. And this is a really, really interesting thing, and you can kind of look it up. But what's unique about a singing voice is we have this extra resonance boost. It has something to do with the shape of our head and our just anatomy and everything like that. But we get this particular boost around like 2,000 to 4,000 hertz. And it's that very pingy kind of tinny ringing sound. And you'll hear it a lot in sort of classical music. It's a great place to sort of listen for it. And it's the reason why we can kind of sing over an orchestra actually with ease and not be overpowered by all these other instruments playing, because not a lot of instruments have that extra boost of resonance right there. So we're kind of listening for that. And the reason I'm talking about this is because that singer's formant helps to kind of stabilize our tone, and we're able to kind of modulate and move through different vowel shapes. And when we have that singer's formant going, I'm going to show you this on a phone app in a second, which is going to be really cool. But that's actually one key aspect of this, is to have that sort of ring in your sound. So it takes a little bit of time. And if you've got some like mucus or grit on your throat or anything, this is going to shake that off. You might kind of do a little bit of that stuff. Be patient. Don't try to force into it. Just give it some repetition. So again, I'm going to do it and just see if you can hear what I'm talking about. So it's kind of sounds like zing, 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 right? Looks like I'm sort of chewing. My tongue is actually doing a little bit of like a wave shape, and we'll talk about sort of what those vowel shapes are in a second. This is going to help you do this in a more nuanced way. But this is a great sort of warm up for anybody to get that sense of resonance. So let's talk about what shapes I'm doing. So we're doing glides, and a glide is a great way to get a smooth connection from one vowel shape to the next. We have two main glides, and they help us pull out resonance. So you'll see these in a ton of exercises that I do with my students on the website, everything like that. It's doing a yaw and a wah, right? So the yaw is the glide with the heel of our tongue in the back. You can kind of see that as e, ah, yaw. Whereas the wah is a glide with our lips, oo, o, ah, wah. Right, so we're working on that smooth function. It's easy to get kind of stuck in one particular vowel, and glides are a great way to gain some flexibility. So this is kind of the thing, though. When people typically do this, we sometimes do something kind of wrong, and it sort of gets us off of our voice, off of that singer's formant and that resonance. And that's like with yaw, we're so used to talking all the time, and so we make our E vowels very visual. We go like E, ya, right? And then you're using a ton of your jaw, and that's actually going to block a lot of the resonance. So when you're doing this, you're going to want to practice going like ya, 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 ya. Try to keep your jaw very soft, and you might be surprised, right? You're going to do this, and you might realize like, oh my gosh, every time I do it, ya, 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 it wants to move. So right away, just maybe put a hand here. You can gently wiggle it. Sometimes people like shake and really wrench at their jaw, and that's not very helpful. It's more just feeling it and being aware and using a little bit of the weight of your arm, and then try to see if you can just get your tongue to move up and down. So again, we're going ya, 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 ya. Do you hear all of that kind of ring that's starting to come out from there? You can kind of go around various parts of your range and ya, 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 ya. See if you can get a little bit of that flexibility with the tongue. The other one, right, is doing the wah. With this one, the incorrect thing that starts to happen that can develop a lot of tension is people bring their jaw up and forward instead of using their lips enough. So they'll go like ooh, and that could, and you'd be surprised too that this actually can be very common, and that's going to get kind of block the resonance as well. So what we're going for is that same kind of neutral jaw placement, and going wah, 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 and you're going to be more likely to get that singer's formant, which is again that ringing sound that you hear. So it has something to do with when we have a smaller vowel shape, it's more likely that we're going to get that resonance and that buzz and the higher partials in the sound. And then we try to keep that as we relax our tongue and we have a bigger space. So it's kind of like we're pulling in some resonance is a nice sort of visual to think about. So what I always try to tell my students is try to find moments in your songs where there's a wah or a yaw. And you'll find actually in these, they're often in transitions into high sections or something that's more challenging. And that's going to help you get a smooth and nice connection once you realize. And sometimes it's not like in the word, but actually in the connection from one word to the next. And that's really fascinating because when we're talking, we don't really think about that as much. So again, you can kind of do these wahs and yahs, and be mindful of not spreading when you do ya, and be mindful of not bringing your jaw forward. So I'll kind of talk about what I do. So I put all of these vowel shapes together. There's something called the circle of vowels, which is a little bit of a music theory joke. But the circle of vowels for me is something that it's a shape where we have a really smooth connection from one vowel shape to the next. And this is something that's going to directly factor into what you do when you're singing. You're going to find you're going to get smoother handoffs of resonance from one vowel format to the other using this concept of a glide. So if we think about a lot of our exercises are like doing like a single vowel, you can get kind of stuck around that. And so by moving through these shapes, we're actually teaching the body to calibrate in a better way. So some of it is just doing the exercise, being patient and listening and noticing that resonance. So this is what I do. And it's very similar to what I do with the hum, but with my mouth open. I'll go, yeah, right. I'm trying to get this very smooth shape from yeah, yeah to oh, yeah. And you see, it starts to make kind of like a circular shape with our mouth. So instead of thinking of vowels, think more about just creating that shape. So again, you can kind of move your head and your neck around and try to relax your shoulders so you sink into this. But it'll go like this. It'll be and the main guide, right, is that ringing sound, that sort of ball of energy you can kind of hear up in that higher area. Now, you may not be used to listening for resonance. You might be like, I can't tell what you're doing and what I'm supposed to be listening for. What I want to show you guys is there's this app, and there's a couple of them like this. This one's called Vocal Spectrum, and it analyzes the overtones in your sound. So you can actually, I'm going to show you, I'm going to sing into my phone for a second. It might be a little weird. That same exact thing. And I'm going to show you what that kind of looks like on this sort of map. And it's showing different frequency levels, right? So it's going from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 to 4,000. And then this is over time. And there's a color reference for where the energy is. So I'll show you what I'm talking about, just so you can really ground yourself in something visual, because this, it's kind of why the heck should I do this? Let me show you, and I think this will kind of help with this process. So I'll go like, I need to turn off my air conditioning, otherwise it'll get in the way. So here we go. I'm gonna go. Now, I want to show you guys what that looks like. Do you see this little thing? I went, you can see these overtones I'm trying to connect them in a really smooth way, handing it off from one vowel shape to the other. And you can actually see it. And the other thing I want to point out, this is that singer's formant resonance. And you can see it's kind of stabilizing everything. It's just a weird way to think about this. I think it's helpful a little bit to have some visual. There's some teachers who have you like strapped up to a little microphone and you're constantly analyzing this. I think that sometimes can get in the way because it's a feeling-based art form, but you can definitely use this as something that can kind of help you get a sense of what resonance is if you're making it. And if you'll notice, mine is like right around 3,000, 4,000. There's a lot of energy, and there's some stuff going on up here too. Yeah, the app is called Spectrum View. Sorry, that's Spectrum View is what it's called. And it's just generally you can do this, what I showed, for free, but there's some other features that you can also do when you pay for the app. But anyways, it's just a great way to show kind of what I'm talking about here and why this relates to smooth tone, because I'm trying to move through those vowel shapes in a really smooth, coordinated way. And the key is to use these glides, right? So again, I put the glides together into this sort of circular shape, And I just want to show, if you were here in the very beginning, yeah, absolutely, no problem, Wendy. If you were here in the beginning, this hum thing, I was actually doing the same sort of shape, the circle of vowels, but with my mouth closed. And you can go back and forth between these two things because it's easier to support and easier to get that sensation when your mouth is closed sometimes for people. Sometimes the other way. So try them both out. So again, I'm going like this. So I just wanted to show you guys, right? It's the same thing. I'm going so I highly recommend you explore this sort of circle of vowels concept. So sometimes, I'll take some of these glides and I'll put them into the exercise when I'm trying to get a singer to have a little more resonance, or for myself to boost that resonance. So you've probably seen some of these exercises, but I'll do things where I go like this, like, yeah, right? We're adding in a glide. Yeah, it's helping us catch a little bit of resonance. So I'll go up and yeah, that kind of feeling. And you just want to watch and make sure you're not going yeah, yeah, because you might block some of that nice resonance and that smooth tone. Sometimes, I think it's important to mention sometimes when we talk about singing with the smooth tone, there's some other aspects, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But this sometimes people are talking about kind of like the darkness of the sound. This helps with that as well, right? The more we do stuff here, it brings us a little more forward in the mask. When we do yaw, helps pull stuff a little more from the back and keep our vocal track a little more open. So the other one, right, you can do is a wah, and you can be like, wah, wah. And I'm really just trying to listen. Do I get that resonance sort of up and floating or not? So sometimes also we'll throw in some extra ones, right? So I have this classic exercise that I do that's like this. I go, the goal is kind of doing tongue push-ups. I'm first using the wah, get some resonance, and ya, ya, ya. And I'm just putting it in a more specific exercise, which makes it a little harder. So that's that concept, just to explain a little bit behind why those exercises help with this smooth tone concept. We're working these glides, getting smooth coordination between our jaw and our tongue and our lips, and making sure mainly that this area kind of stays out of the way a little bit. There's some activity in our jaw, of course, but we just want to try to minimize that so that we have more happening in the back of the tract and it's more open there. And this leads me to the next concept of how we sing with a smooth tone. This I like to call the neutral larynx concept. So you probably heard some of these things too, probably from Camille as well. This idea is we want to make sure that we have kind of a neutral vowel as the center of our tone, like an or an ah. An is probably one of the most neutral and obvious vowels to use, but it's more of a shape feeling. It's this sensation of having everything relaxed and open. And I recommend you can actually find this neutral larynx feeling as you take in your breath. So I do it ahead of time. I kind of set up the space. And this is going to get you a much smoother connection from one vowel to the next. It'll help you with even doing the circle of vowel thing. If this is, at first the circle of vowel thing can feel pretty sticky if you're not used to moving in that way through the vowels. So be patient. So this concept is when we take our breath, I can kind of, for a moment, kind of drop my legs. I'm not trying to push it too hard, but there's a moment where it can take a little bit of space and refresh. I'm trying to make sure that my jaw and everything is kind of open as I take my breath. So this is great for a couple exercises. We think of having the vowel and then moving our vowel shapes through that right? So it's like sometimes people talk about this like as the under vowel and the over vowel. So an exercise like this, they're all related, of course, but an exercise that's kind of more specifically like this would be to do like I'm setting that neutral larynx and then pushing up through an E and then an A and then just kind of coasting on the and sometimes even just coasting on an can be hard, like holding a neutral open vowel. We sort of flinch and lurch at it. Take some time, just go through it slowly, feel the motion of your tongue moving up through that shape. So it's and we do this in various parts of our range. So it might be here. And again, the thing that kind of to me sounds less smooth as a tone is when people kind of move quickly from a spread to a stretched vowel or something where you hear like ya ya, where there's a lot of motion, like versus you can start to kind of smooth those overtones over. So this is something you can apply to your songs where there are moments where it maybe is feeling a little extra chewy with your mouth moving up and down and your jaw engaged. And if you can get a smoother transition just by keeping this all hanging there and more neutral. And again, it's often easiest to do when you take your breath. So we're planning ahead a lot of the times in these phrases that are difficult when we want to link together a cool run that's maybe moving through some different vowel shapes at the same time. You'll notice there are always a lot of time there, yeah, and whoa, and things like that, where we have a glide. So it's part of just the mechanics of our body and what serves us best. So that's a really easy way to get into some nice resonance and have that nice open space so that you can move your tongue through that space. The other one, and this one's kind of hard, I'll slow it down. It's just a slightly more challenging version of all of this, but you'll see it's kind of similar principles, and it's like this. I go and we're trying to kind of gently move through these vowel shapes. And I recommend you can kind of do this faster and just get kind of loosey-goosey and sort of dopey with it. Again, it's like this. People are always like, wait, what vowels when? I'm doing and then I'm first pushing up to an E, then back to and then an A, back to and then an O, practicing sort of rounding over everything, back to O, and then oo. And so that's sort of the idea. It's a little bit of like there's a rhythmic flow to some of these exercises, just it makes them easier to grasp. And so that's why sometimes they're in a particular shape like this. So again, it's like and you can get kind of looser and looser and be like and we're just trying to get that smooth flow from one vowel shape to the next. So I highly recommend it. You'll start to hear a ton of ring. And again, this is a lot about tongue flexibility and getting the jaw to just sort of get out of the way so that we don't get that sort of rough transition of resonance that sounds just a little less smooth, right? A little more kind of speech-like or shouty. And sometimes we want that again. I'm not saying that that's bad, but if this is something that you haven't grasped as the smooth tone feeling, it can just really, really ease up a lot of extra tension and motion that you might be having. And that's really like the key to resonant singing in general, is it's efficiency. It makes it so that we don't have to push as hard with our support because we have this resonance that's continuing to sort of push the waveform along and amplify it, sort of like the physics of it all. So we do a combination of these two forces, support plus resonance, and that creates this weird balancing act where it almost looks like sometimes like you're not even trying very hard at all. And that, again, that's where I think where a lot of the illusion of like, oh, I was just born this way. It's easy for that person. It's so hard for me. It's through this practice of calibrating that we find that effortlessness. And so I highly recommend try these exercises out, and you might find that you start to get a much smoother transition from one shape to the next. You'll add in the consonants, and you can actually, even with our consonants, we can find like a smooth transition. Sometimes I'll do that as well. I'll kind of play around with like M's and N's and NGs, going like I'm trying to like pass the resonance actually from the front to the middle to the back and feel that out. And then from there, you can kind of in a smooth way open up to all these different shapes and lock into that resonant space. So really, really cool. Does anyone have any questions with this? I know I've been kind of talking on for a while. I know some people have come and gone, but is this making sense? Do you? I'm always curious about people's perception of resonance and what they hear and feel when they're singing, because it's a feeling-based art form in a lot of ways. And so this sensation game can be challenging and a little strange. And you might find some days it's just tight and tired, and you get more of that raspy sound. And doing this kind of stuff in a very gentle, low area is, I think, the key to decompressing the voice. So if you have a lot of like vocal fatigue from high belting, the key is to find balance and to do this kind of work, and it's going to kind of mellow out maybe that tendency to want to press or kind of lurch into the sound too much. So that actually leads me to the next concept, which is smooth tone. Sometimes when people are talking about this, they're talking about legato, right? This is this Italian word for linked or chained together. And it's the idea of how one sound connects to the next, right? This is sort of what we've been talking about. But, the voice is all interconnected. And a huge part of legato is also our breath and our support. And so I always like to bring in a little bit of every concept, because singing is such a juggling act. We're focusing on resonance as this key factor in this lesson, but sometimes what makes a voice less smooth is over supporting and under supporting things and kind of having this feeling of lurching around. So that's kind of a tricky thing. If you sing choral music, you might hear this all the time where people are trying to get you to make sure that your high notes and your low notes are balanced, and it doesn't sound like it pops out of the texture, right? So this is kind of the same concept. Like sometimes resonantly when we do sort of force things, it pops out of the texture. And then sometimes because of what we do with our support, it can pop out of the texture. So one way I like to expose this or to practice it is to do patterns that are not a fifth, but a sixth. So they're a little irregular. And that does this funny thing to us, because it's somewhat about how theory works and our voices and our body. But that six on top, we have this tendency to want to do this, to go like, and this will be this like ya kind of sort of a thing. So this is a little more of a support concept. I'm thinking about my breath, like maybe if I think about just the TS sort of sound that I'll use to demonstrate the undercurrent of our support. It's sort of like this. I'm adding on pressure. You notice I had to kind of push out the most right at the top there. And that's going to be a really helpful trick to stabilize the resonance there and to make sure that it doesn't we don't have some sort of weird lurchy thing happen. So again, I'm going like, you might think of all of these factors. I'm doing a little yaw in there, right, to help get some resonance right in that moment. And then I'm also thinking about having this neutral larynx, like I'm kind of saving that little kick out feeling for right. I've set up this resonant space. But the trick here is I'm using a little bit of a kick to help push it to that sixth and back. So that's a nice sort of way to practice this. Sometimes doing like the full octave sweep and making sure that you don't go like right, but I'm trying to like smooth it out. Those are a little more of a support concept, and it's about having that evenness of breath and saving some energy to the sort of the end of that or the middle of that phrase, right? Where on the top, and making sure that you're really stabilizing with your support at that moment. Hey, Skippy. Yeah, Totally. So these are really, really helpful. Sometimes we get stuck in these patterns, right? We think of like only doing 5 finger patterns, right? That kind of thing. So adding in that extra, you're gonna feel a little bit of your belly engage, and you might want to put a hand there as you do that. So that can be really, really helpful. And we're paying attention to, again, sometimes when support doesn't work out correctly, we try to compensate up here. It's all interconnected. And so that's what people do, this sort of like right, and that's sort of a way of trying to make it easier to support, because we're blocking off the space a little bit, and so that helps sort of with the pressure. But that, again, that's a compensating thing, and it can really affect the smoothness of our tone, right? There's a drastic change, like instead I'm trying to keep this all just sort of hanging there, and then engage some support on that extra bit to sort of pump it up and over. I don't know if you've come across this, but there's a lot of songs, especially when you use like a pentatonic scale, where you pop up to that sixth, and it can be challenging actually. And it's usually like, if a song is like starting off the root, it's usually as you're getting into the pre-chorus or you're getting into a chorus that you start getting up to the sixth and the octave, right? Like the sort of like that kind of stuff. So that can help you with that sensation. There are other exercises that do that, but it's just sort of a little bit of a nod to phrasing and legato. And what I mean by this is phrasing appropriately is putting in the right amount of energy in the right place as an undercurrent. We're sort of stepping on the accelerator with our lower belly and our back, and it's allowing everything to stay stable so that we don't have to, our body's going to want to do this sort of flinchy thing. It's going to lock in the jaw or the tongue, the head and the neck if we don't have that support. So you might be going through some of these purely vowel exercises and feeling like I'm getting really stuck and I feel really, really tight. And you need to go back and do some support stuff actually, so you can maintain that open space, and then come back and see if you can slowly isolate moving your tongue through things, or just add a little extra push in your support on the top. So that's that concept. I love going through this with students, like taking a phrase and kind of dissecting what is the shape of it, right? Is it something where it starts with a lot of energy and then kind of dips down, and then you have to pop back up? There's all sorts of things, right? Every song's a little different, every phrase. You pulse it a little bit and then relax, then pulse again. So there are these little notes, and these are the places where we want to save some of our support energy. So when I do these breathing exercises and I'm showing people like sitting on just a constant breath and then pulsing in, that kind of, or pulsing out, right? Make sure the coordination goes this way. That's sort of this idea, right? It's the undercurrent. So I might be singing a phrase and be like, right? There are these moments, and you might, you'd be surprised. You might just be, if you're not thinking about that, this part of your body, the lower belly and back, just stops activating, and then you might start squeezing in. And these are all really bad habits that just make it harder and harder to sing and to breathe, take another full breath. It all backs up, and it leads to this feeling of a not neutral larynx, right? When our larynx gets really tight, either moving up and getting kind of stuck up by our tongue, or sometimes people try, in anticipation of this, try to press down really low. And the main point is the larynx can just kind of float in the middle. And that's going to give you really great access to all these sort of different resonance strategies. So a lot of the time in the practice, I'm thinking about, can I find the center of my voice, use all these vowel shapes to calibrate, and then try to just kind of poke in and out of them a little bit. And that's going to give you sort of a smooth center to work with. So again, if you're singing like choral music, R&B, in particular situations, sometimes you kind of want that pop out and back. So it really depends on the context. Classical music, certainly, and certain pop moments where you're just kind of trying to stay really chill and coast on a vowel without feeling like you're muscling. The key is in the neutral larynx and finding that singer's formant, because it's going to allow you to just kind of sit there more stable. So yeah, that's a huge aspect of all of this. And it kind of leads us to this other concept, which is register blending. Um, this concept of these different vowel shapes having a different kind of resonance and pulling out like a higher or lower place, right? When I showed the on the phone app, you could see it was kind of that line, right? Was more colored. That was more energy, and it's showing actually on the reverse. There are parts here. I might as well pull it up if I have it still. Um, I don't have it. I can close it out. It's fine. On the other side, you can see that there's no energy. It's a sort of dark space, so it's kind of muted. Um, that's that's sort of part of this whole concept. Um, we're sort of, as we move our tongue and our jaw, we're kind of and our lips, we're creating these sort of sweet spots where it resonates more, right? And certain vowels have they resonate in a certain place better than other places, and so you'll notice that feeling um, when we transition between chest voice and head voice. And this probably will be, at some point I'll talk about a whole lesson plan on exercises for register blending and mixing. But I want to kind of mention here that all singing is overtone and resonant singing, and actually using this vowel modification, going from an ah to an e, is going to help us with the handoff of resonance as we go to a different strategy and we go to these higher and higher overtones. As we sing into head voice, right, we're going to the highest part of our range. And so my point is that registers and the concept of registers and the mixed range is more of a metaphor than something that's like a real mechanism. There's a lot of different options and different ways to switch and hand off the resonance from your chest voice sound to your head voice sound. And so that might be kind of a weird thing to think about. It's actually that our chest voice and our head voice is really defined by the dysfunction, or when it cracks or pops, or we have trouble moving from one to the next. And it's a great learning tool. It's really important at first, actually, to be like, here's your chest voice and this feeling, and here is the head voice feeling up here. And I know I'm showing sort of sympathetic resonance stuff. It's all happening right here. But that feeling is really great because we can learn, in pieces. And then we kind of do these specific ways to switch, and we talk about that transition. And then eventually you learn that it's just your ability to slowly modify the vowel shape, and a little bit with your jaw, and a little bit with your lips, but mainly just the lips and the tongue. And that is going to help you switch over. You need that neutral larynx, because when we go to our highest pitches, we need a little more from the top and the back of our vocal tract. So we need that space back there. So I'll show you what I mean. Like, I've done this one pretty much in every one of these so far, but I'm switching from chest voice into head voice, and I'm using the path of least resistance at first. That's really the key. It's kind of important to know what's easier to do with the voice and what's harder. And that can be the big issue, right? You're doing all the hard things first. And so, of course, you're really frustrated by the whole process. And it's hard to parcel these things out. We have to talk about the mechanism and such. So chest voice vowels like ah and come really naturally. And when we're up in head voice, these E vowels or some more narrow vowels are going to be easier to get those higher partials. Very similar to what we talked about with the glides, like wah, ya. So when I go like you see I'm slowly moving through that same vowel shape. It's like a glorified large yaw that I just did very slowly, and I'm paying attention to that handoff of resonance. It feels almost like a C shape, right? The back of the throat. I'm not following it with my body. I'm just aware of it and trying to get out of the way, actually. So again, I'm like neutral larynx. I'm trying to get back down. You might find if you're holding anything, it'll get stuck right there, actually, if you're tight with your body. That's why I talked about stretching, going back to stretching. As you're doing this kind of stuff, it's very particular. You might find, I'm getting really tight, kind of getting like these weird aches. Go like take a moment, take a bath, I don't know, stretch, relax, lay down for a bit, take a nap, come back and try it again. And that's really the key. So when I do these kinds of practices, sometimes I'm sitting here for a while, I'm doing repetitions, trying to get into a flow. But I really recommend throughout the day, like find little moments to yourself to kind of touch base with your voice. And that's teaching your body a lot more. So like you find a resonant hallway, or I always say sing in the shower, right? Because you've got something that's giving you feedback. Right? There's a little bit of a shout out to the last lesson about singing in tune. I talked a little bit about resonance and how it can kind of guide us. Um, in this case, you can just use that feedback to just help you know that you're sounding and that you don't have to push, you don't have to force it, right? When I'm singing with an orchestra, it's really tempting, or even a band, right, where you have more electronic instruments. It's really tempting to want to like start pushing and moving more. And actually, in reality, the best thing to do is to just think more about resonant space and to get a lighter, kind of more relaxed sensation here. You can still do stuff in your belly and your back, but that feeling of actually just trying to open up and find that smooth connection, you'll realize that your sound is actually louder in a lot of situations, even though it feels like you're doing less. And my teacher back in the day would always say, less is more. And that's a really frustrating thing to say, but it's also true with the voice. It's all about balance. And so if you're having trouble with this kind of resonant singing, it might be because there's not enough support behind it. It might be because you're tired, you're overshooting it, you're over pressing into the sound. All of these things are going to block the resonance. And my point is yeah, that seems like very daunting, but you can explore this with the feelings, right? Do the circle of vowel thing. And if you notice that, like, this classic thing that happens, people go like, and kind of move quickly through the really hard, narrow part where it feels like you might get stuck. And the trick is to kind of sit there and gently calibrate and allow the body to sort of find the path of least resistance by going through it. These are all kinds of glides, actually. I was just showing you some of the big ones, right? Like wah, ya, 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 ya. The more you do this kind of practice, the more you realize that everything can be kind of a glide. Everything can be this gentle, smooth coordination. Hi, Chrissy. Sorry about yesterday. We had different on the schedule, so so glad to see you here. And definitely, for everyone else, like listen to this this lecture from the very beginning. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. Resonant singing as a key factor for finding smooth tone and handoff of resonance from one vowel shape to the next. And then we even talked about moving through registers and that sort of concept. So I think it's really, really fascinating, and it's the key to understanding that registers are kind of a metaphor. There's some great articles on this, and it's more of a handoff of resonance. And so it's really all one voice, right? And that's kind of what we're going for. So sometimes people get confused. They think like the mixed register is like its own unique sort of thing. And it's really just where the two sort of resonance strategies overlap, and you have the easiest job switching between one strategy and the next. And I also recommend, for anyone who didn't get it down, this really cool app, Spectrum View, can help you kind of see how smooth your connection is from one vowel to the next. Although you can feel it too, and you can see it visually looking in a mirror, right? When I'm doing this, like, trying to get that nice smooth handoff from one to the next, almost like a little bit like an egg beater kind of a thing. Again, that's just one shape, the sort of a nice one to go through, but you can do anything here. You can practice just moving from any vowel shape to the next. The main principle is try it in a low part in your register. And even if that's hard, then try with your mouth closed, right? So going like, see I'm trying to go very slowly through it, and you'll start to realize there's all these little spots where you can get a different kind of boost of resonance. And I really think this is the key also to blending, right? Here's a concept of smooth tone, right? Blending with other singers. When you harmonize, when you sing in a choir, I had a choir teacher back in college who'd say, sing in the sleeve, right? And it's that concept of a neutral larynx and moving your vowel shapes through there so that other people can blend with your tone better, right? The problem with the voice is we have a lot of different ways of doing things. And so if we can support from different sort of places, and not all of them are ideal. And then in some ways, some of them are harder for other people to match, right? And so that's the key to singing with other people, especially in these choral moments where you want that really kind of smooth coasting voice. It's all about that resonance. And so I highly recommend doing these kinds of exercises. The ya, wa, anytime you see that in a song, that's a key, or it's sort of a clue to tell you that maybe you can add and pull a little resonance into that spot, or use it as a way to kind of stretch open a little bit. Every time you take a breath, you have a chance to reset the larynx and kind of sing through a more relaxed, open space. And that's going to help you get some more resonance as well. Does anyone have any questions about all of this? I think it's really interesting. It talks a little bit about physics and how our voice works with the mechanics, and kind of achieves that a musical tone, right, that can oscillate and can be subtly shifted so that we can blend and adapt to other singers, right? When I'm working with the choir, some of the choirs that I sing with, we talk about this, about tone and the shape and sound of the tone that we want. In fact, a conductor, this I think might be kind of cool to talk about, it's not just keeping time. They're using their hands to actually a lot of times imitate the shape of the mouth and the vocal tract to try and coax out a certain kind of tone so that everyone's looking at the same shape and they're all kind of responding appropriately. That's a key to that. So sometimes you'll see this, right? They're saying, I want more of the back, or sometimes you'll see that and they want you to kind of pull it forward, right? So this is a little bit of a console toggle that we pay attention to as choristers. So next time you check out a choral thing and you look at moments when they show the conductor, see if you can notice some of those things when they're trying to adjust the tone that they're hearing by visually representing it with their hands to other singers. And sometimes we just talk about it too, like, that was a little too bright. Can you find a slightly more covered ah, right? Which means in singer lingo, a little more lip action and a little less spreading. So those are some of those concepts. The other thing I would say is, like, okay, how do I apply this to a song that I'm singing? I mentioned, try to find moments where there's a glide that can really help you. Moments where there's diphthongs, where you're changing from one vowel shape to the next. Vocalises, where you're doing runs, you're often kind of going through a yeah or whoa. And it actually really helps as you're doing the run to slowly change the shape of the vowel, sometimes based on where you're going with the registration, right? Just like what I mentioned with the ah to e and back. You'll notice this as you start listening to great singers, that they're sometimes doing this intuitively and sometimes very conscientiously to get a particular kind of sound, to imitate an instrument. The other thing you can do is, and this is kind of a weird one, but I do it with classical stuff sometimes. It's not always helpful, but you can take out all the consonants in a certain song. If you're finding, like, especially like a really pitter-pattery song where you're like, ba, 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 and you're just moving your lips all, and it's kind of getting your jaw too engaged, you can actually take the consonants out and try to just find a smooth connection from one vowel shape to the next, the major vowels in it. And you'll find that it's kind of like the exercise I showed earlier, the like, sort of like, and that's why I came up with this concept of circle of vowels. And there's other singing teachers who do similar things, right? Moving through different vowel shapes to listen for that resonance and to use it as a guide for your smooth tone, right? If you don't have the resonance in your voice, it may be an indication that and it's not connecting from one note to the next or one vowel. It may be an indication that you've got some jaw tension or some tongue tension, or some of these other things in the mechanism aren't quite working out appropriately to get that smooth balance. So Yeah, that's kind of the main thing. You might find with the taking out all the consonants that you actually have to write them out, because sometimes that's just is so weird to try and just read a word and say it without having the consonants. Sometimes I'll literally just do it for a few words as it's like going to a high note, right? Where I feel like I might kind of press into it or something, and I just want that yeah, yeah kind of smooth feeling. And again, that's usually when in a song I'm feeling like I'm squeezing or trying to activate this area too much. It's always a balancing act, right? So we talked about strengthening the voice using our lower abdominal support pressure. Just doing that on its own, it leads to a certain kind of singing, which can be like a bulldozer. Sometimes can be kind of unhealthy because you can really be pressing into it. Um, Only thinking about resonance leads to just a different kind of like lighter, more ethereal sound. And so, as you can see, we want a little bit of both, right? They kind of work hand in hand to stabilize our tone and to keep us in sort of a smooth center so that our jaw and our tongue don't kind of lock into place. Or our larynx, right? That's the other one, is when these things get super tight, kind of like can hold our larynx in place. Um, yeah, so that's kind of the main topic and everything that I kind of planned for us to talk about. Does anyone have any questions? The last few of you who are here, or any it doesn't have to be a question. It can be a comment on something that you do that you really like for smooth tone practice, or just to get an easier connection from one vowel to the next. Uh, I'll leave that kind of open because I remember last time that some questions kind of came in at the very end, and so I always like to entertain those. Um, do you find that there are particular vowel shapes or combinations that are hard for you? That's always an interesting question. I find sometimes going up to an E vowel in chest voice at the last second, like in the kind of in the middle, can be kind of tricky, right? Because you're doing this, and then sometimes we E, right? We might do that, and we want it to be like I. That's kind of why I do some of those exercises the way that I do, where I'm like sometimes that can be hard. Um, yeah, and sometimes actually even in like the very very low register. Uh, Quickest way to relax the tongue. Yeah. So there's a couple tricks here. Usually, what happens is it's one of those support things. When we're not supporting enough, the tongue can get used to sort of pulling back, or pushing forward and kind of locking into place. You can feel for it right under here sometimes, and so sometimes just the awareness of having this here. And I'll do an exercise like A to O, something where it's a brighter vowel to a darker vowel, where I'm starting to cover my lips, and that's often when the tongue wants to curl or pull back, and you can catch it there. And so that's a great way to train that coordination. So I'll go like well, and I'm just trying to keep that tongue neutral, kind of hanging here like I have a lift. And that kind of feeling is going to help you gain that kind of coordination. And you can put your finger down here like if it's really hard, it's going to potentially block the resonance. So this all kind of follows with what we're talking about. The tongue can be, as I say, the gatekeeper to the registers and to our resonance. So sometimes when people are like, I always have this raspy tone, it kind of tickles a little bit. It's not like damaged. I've been, checking with ENTs and things like that. I'm like, oh, it's usually because of some tongue tension. And so one thing is doing that kind of thing, working on rounding your lips, keeping your tongue still. And you'll find actually that you can save that feeling, and it starts to kind of work its way into other parts. That's keeping the tongue still. The other one is doing the yaw thing, actually. Getting your tongue moving up and down. So doing where like yaw, 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 yaw. So we're trying to work both things, right? We want the tongue to be still when we want it. Sometimes we want it to be flexible. Tongue tension is just when it gets stuck in a particular position, right? It can get stuck high, it can get stuck low. And so actually doing all of these kinds of exercises, the circle of vowels thing, where we're going like, yeah, that can help you get that tongue nice and loose. Um, One trick that I've mentioned before is putting. Oh yeah, you're totally welcome. I feel like people don't address the tongue thing enough, and it's kind of the major mover of our vowels. It's doing a lot, and it's hard to relax it in the right way, so that if you over relax it, sometimes the words come out a little wrong. It sounds a little weird. Um, and so it's finding just the right amount of activity. It can be really, really challenging because it is doing a lot in our sound. So that's why I think about moving it and keeping it still. And then I was going to mention you can be very careful with this, but you can put like an almond or a nut, something right here. I try to avoid like a Skittle or something where it's like sugary because you'll kind of start to salivate around it too much. And you can't do this for too long. But you'll put it right here, not too far back, obviously. Don't choke. Be very, very careful with this and do that AO kind of exercise. Now, you can't do every kind of exercise with this because that's, it's the tongue's moving in certain ways, but particularly going like, well, I found that really helpful because I had a certain amount of tongue tension when, I was figuring out things with my voice. It's very normal to have that. And putting the almond there, it just gave me more awareness of what my tongue was doing. You can, looking in a mirror, of course, really helps too, but you'll feel it when it wants to kind of pull back a little bit. And it just helps you keep it more neutral. So I always say, like, the thought of trying to do too much can sometimes make us over engage, and it can be very, very frustrating because it's like, just relax your tongue. And it's like, don't think about the pink elephant. It's like, now my tongue is engaged because I'm thinking about it. So yeah, absolutely. You're very welcome. Yeah, so I think about it like that you just have to be kind of like, you have to work around it in sort of a slightly different way. You have to think about just the awareness and like notice and observe what's happening and allow the body to change, because that's sort of the cool thing about all of this is our body wants to find homeostasis, balance, the path of least resistance, and we're just coaxing it there, and then it does most of the work for us. And that's what's so cool. Singing is a mind body connection, soft focus kind of thing where it's somewhat subconscious and somewhat conscious. We kind of talk without realizing what we're saying a little bit. It's sort of weird, right, when you talk about the neurology of all of that and just how the mechanism works. It's a little bit in a soft focus place. It's a little bit subconscious, very much subconscious. And so it's really hard to figure out how to stimulate it appropriately. And so a lot of times it's going through the right kinds of exercises that trend your coordination to the right direction and the repetition. And then eventually the body locks into it and you notice those things, right? It's like, oh, I can hear resonance coming into my sound. How do you sing with emotion? Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, and might take a little bit. I might have to address this a little more in a different sort of lecture. I kind of put it in performance strategy skills. Some of those, there's a number of things to think about, but on the technical aspect, I would say a lot of the time, the emotion comes in with the use of support, and so the changing from like a more kind of mellow tone to starting to push into it a little bit within reason. Some people will, some really great singers learn to ride the edge of the board and kind of go just that place of instability, sometimes a little bit of that grit. So a lot of the times singing with emotion on a technical side is actually changing something about the timbre of the voice on purpose, right? So like, we're talking about all this stuff, and I'm not saying that like it's wrong to do the other stuff. It's just learning to control your voice and finding the middle so that you can sometimes break the rules. You're very welcome. I'll see you next week. Yeah, so I'll just finish off this concept, like sometimes cracking on purpose, right? Like, oh, like there's a little, obviously like a classic, almost like quintessential sort of adding emotion thing. It can come off as maybe cheesy in some situations, but it can be very, very effective when you do it in the right place. Going between breathiness to, so slightly less supported, more breathy, maybe using more resonance, to going into your more strident support. That could be a way to indicate emotional change. And then some of it is this mind-body connection thing. So what I would say is like, we do these exercises. Yeah, it's a little more of actually your lower belly and back, but yeah, support work. Yeah, more of that kind of stuff where you're, and using SOVTs and a little bit of consonant work to kind of build the pressure. You get a little more of a plosive sound within reason, always a balance thing. But again, what I wanted to say is the point of doing this whole weird practice and really trying to intentionally do certain things and notice the change is to connect our mind body, sort of to have a better mind body connection so that our thoughts manifest through our voice easier. So, if I was like, this is how you have emotion, we would all sound the same and it wouldn't really be that great anymore, right? So there's this magic to the unknown. Sometimes you surprise yourself and you're like, wow, I was feeling the lyrics and really thinking about the meaning of the song and using sense memories. These are some other performance skills we'll talk about, like taking a past memory and trying to relate it to what you're feeling in the song and doing a little bit of poetry analysis, right? That kind of stuff, when you feel it and you're really thinking about it and you're visualizing it, it comes out in your voice. It comes out in your whole presence. And that's probably the main key. It's in our eyes, like, yeah, we can do stuff with our facial expressions and all of those things. But again, if you try to plan it out too much, it seems forced. So I'm always like, how do you sing with emotion? Get your voice connected with good technique so that you can lean into it and pull back, right? Kind of find that ebb and flow in the texture, light and shading, light and dark, sort of. And then, really, really pay attention to what you're singing. Like, what is it meaningful to you? Like, what feelings does it evoke? And, there's something really interesting about singing in general. I'll leave with this concept is like, we come into the world screaming, we use our voice from the very beginning, and it's so deeply connected to our sense of self and our emotions. And using your gut is a big part of it. It's this feeling of like the whale, like when we wail out into the world, we can learn to control that in a way that's healthy, but that it comes from this desire to express and to put our energy out there, right? It's almost like the primordial concept and beginning of all words, right? Why did we shout out to communicate with each other? Getting a little heady. We're at the very end of our class, but I really think there's something intuitive about that feeling of digging into your gut and to and express out like that it's what draws us closer together. So that's part of the, like, you get tingles when someone really does that from an authentic place, and it's physical and both mental. So yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, I think it's so cool to experience that. That's kind of the whole point of doing all of this stuff, is to get your voice in a flexible place so that you could express stuff. It's kind of the vehicle. It's not the stuff. The stuff is your experience as an artist, your connection to the world around you and to the music that you're singing. So we do all of this kind of technical stuff so we don't have to think about it, so that we can just be present with the music and be present with the people around us. And I think that's always when the most magical stuff happens. It's hard to get to. So it's always just like the holy grail. We're trying for that, but sometimes it falls short. Sometimes we get stuck in some technical things, but that's the nature of the game. So when it's totally worth it, because when you find those moments, we all feel it. It's exhilarating. So you guys are very welcome. I'm glad this was a really great class. And I'm glad people showed up for it. It's really exciting to talk about this kind of stuff. I love the concept of smooth tone, resonant singing. It's, I think, essential. And yes, it's all about that tongue thing. So go and work out your tongues and try to find some flexibility and listen for that resonant ring. All right. Well, I will catch you guys next week, and we'll talk about nervous, shaky voice and a little bit of some performance skills. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. All right. Take care, everybody.